Dear Miss Sarkeesian, I've been making video games professionally for over 20 years. In that span, I've worked on over 24 different game titles. Most recently, I was a game director as part of the billion-dollar Disney Infinity franchise for 4 different playsets. In the wake of the cancellation of Disney Infinity, I've been enjoying a bit of a sabbatical where I am free to speak my mind about various video game-related topics. One of those topics is sexism in video games. And of course, thanks to your visibility and your Tropes vs. Women YouTube series, your name comes up frequently. Because most of the titles I've worked on have been family-friendly, you haven't had anything to say about them, and so I should say that I have no personal axe to grind with you. However, as I've engaged with the community on the sexism in games topic, I've noticed something interesting. Although you've been generally well received by the mainstream press, the majority of both gamers and game developers, like myself, tend to view your representations of the games you've discussed as being very skewed. And hence, we've tended to regard your consequent criticisms anywhere from being suspicious to being outright false. I think this is something of a shame because, as a commercial art form that has now eclipsed all others in terms of reach and worldwide sales, video games are a worthy subject for criticism. A genuine, insightful, and well-informed feminist perspective on games and the gaming industry would be welcomed. Unfortunately, Anita, your approach appears to be alienating the preponderance of those who should be the most interested in what you have to say, the gaming community itself. Rather than seeing you as an insider who is seeking to provide valuable insights to improve and educate our community, we tend to see you as an outsider who is deliberately misrepresenting things in the interest of self-promotion and profit. Now, I don't think that you are having too much of an influence within the gaming community, as both gamers and game developers are continuing to go about their business as usual. I do think, however, that your misrepresentations are doing considerable harm to the understanding of the art form for those who are outside our community and may not be as well informed, such as many within the non-gaming mainstream media. Even more troubling, I think your biased depictions of video games may be discouraging women from entering the industry by portraying the gaming community to be inherently unfriendly to them. Your work might even undercut the current positive trend that shows that the percentage of women involved in game development has doubled in the past decade. And now, with your recent video entitled Not Your Exotic Fantasy from January of 2017, you appear to be expanding your criticism to include not only gender, but also race. In so doing, you skew your focus toward finding the very rare instances of alleged negative portrayals of those who are darker skinned, even though the overwhelming majority tend to be positive. You also appear to be deliberately ignoring the virtually endless contributions and positive representations of those who are Asian. Seeing all this is what inclines me to write this open letter and to make this video. You see, Anita, I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. I hope that the stated aims for your not-for-profit organization are genuine. I want to believe that, at some level, maybe you really do care about video games and their influence upon our global culture, and that, as you say, we hope to cultivate new media literacies that will make us all more responsible media users in a just and more equitable virtual world. If improved media responsibility and education regarding issues of gender and race really are your goals, then I have 2 simple suggestions regarding your work that I think will go a long way towards facilitating an improved reception within the gaming community. I am confident that, if you did just these 2 things, you would greatly improve how your work is perceived by both gamers and by game developers. Number 1. Acknowledge your criticism has a very narrow focus and that most games are neither sexist nor racist. Now, I recognize that your videos are being made under the auspices of feminist frequency, so that should indicate to the viewer something of your ideological viewpoint. However, the trouble here is that you frequently present yourself as an expert on the portrayal of women in video games. Now, you and I both know that, if we're being honest with each other, that your exposure to games is too small to constitute anything approaching genuine expertise. Furthermore, that you've elected to target a minuscule subset of games where the alleged sexism is the most obvious and egregious, rather than done anything approaching a broad-based, industry-wide investigation. This is glaringly apparent from your videos, as you tend to return again and again to finding fault with the same few dozen or so M-rated first-person shooter titles aimed at a specific young and predominantly male demographic. However, this subset of games represents but a tiny sliver of the tens of thousands of games that are out there. For example, you largely ignore the existence of entire genres of games, like puzzle, and party, and racing, and world building, and strategy, and economic, and sports, and simulation, and so on and so on. And for the most part, you also elect to ignore the thousands of role-playing games that include a character creation option where men and women are consistently treated as equivalent in terms of their power and capacity. To me, to portray yourself as an expert on the ocean by focusing in on a single drop of water is both dishonest and qualifies as the epitome of hubris. Now, I am not saying that you need to include all these other games in your critical investigation. I only think that you need to acknowledge that the majority of games in existence fall outside of your examination, and hence that, in fact, most video games probably aren't appreciably sexist or racist at all. Or to put this another way, one of your most famous quotes comes from a conference you attended where you said that everything is sexist, everything is racist, and everything is homophobic, and that you have to point it all out. Some of your supporters have stated that you don't actually believe this, but rather that you are poking fun at an attitude that you used to hold. Others, however, have noticed that the full context of the quote indicates that maybe you really do feel this way, but that you've merely elected to pick your battles now in order to come across as less obnoxious. So here's your opportunity to clarify things. Where do you stand upon games in the gaming industry as a whole? Is it a cesspool of sexism and racism and homophobia? In my view, it would go a long way towards improving your reputation within the gaming community to repudiate your everything is sexist comment and admit that, in truth, most video games and most gamers are neither sexist, nor racist, nor homophobic. In fact, that when viewed as a whole, video games are probably the most egalitarian form of entertainment ever created. You are merely focusing your attentions on those areas that you find personally problematic. Number 2, engage with those that have a different opinion from your own. This second point is the more important of the two. It is well known that you close the comment sections of your videos and won't accept even so much as a simple click of a like or a dislike. Allegedly, you've done this to insulate yourself from threats and personal attacks. However, as a fellow YouTube creator who does keep his comments open, I know that you have the option to moderate comments, so that explanation seems rather hollow to me. Anita, you need to recognize that your steadfast refusal to engage with anyone who might disagree with you is very troubling to the gaming community and greatly damages your reputation. It makes you appear as though you consider yourself above all criticism. We can't help but ask, why should we listen to anything you have to say if you won't listen to anything that we have to say? Fortunately, you can easily correct this problem simply by engaging with us. Open your comment sections. Allow viewers to like or dislike your videos. Or if that seems like too much of a stretch, perhaps you can use your popularity with the media to set up a platform and host an open forum for discussion and debate. By so doing, you could even set the terms and the agenda of the topics that you'd like to cover. Personally, I would readily volunteer and even pay my own way to be there. I would relish the opportunity to engage with you in a respectful and informed public discussion. And although we clearly have differing viewpoints regarding the topic of sexism in video games, I would hope that such a dialogue could be productive, wherein we would focus exclusively on the issues themselves without any fear of personal attacks. Finally, Anita, I think it would be worthwhile for you to contrast how you've approached feminism as it relates to gaming against how gaming journalist Liana Kersner has. Now, I've never met Liana, and I do not agree with many of her viewpoints, but through her knowledge and her openness, she has earned my respect. Her 14-part series called A Gamer's Guide to Feminism is well worth your time, especially as a contrast to your Tropes vs. Women series. Although not as slickly produced, it is clear from the content that Liana not only plays the games that she talks about, but that her understanding of both feminism and gaming is broad, well-rounded, and nuanced. And ultimately, that is what worthwhile criticism should be. Thank you for your time, and game on. Sincerely, Troy Levitt.